Hello, all, and welcome back to the second edition of Two Men and Their Beliefs. With me today, as always, is Mr. CCDV. Welcome, sir. So, today we're going to touch on Mr. CCDV's last week of recordings, and we're also going to add a new segment that will pop in from time to time called, well, Stories with Canuck. And they're going to be kind of life parables in a religious framework. I think is the way I've got it worked. I don't know how to really describe it. It's just something that has really been irking me that I want to do. So I'm going to do it here and see how it plays. So we'll do that. And then we're just going to have a general discussion about kind of letting you guys know where our faith started. So it's not necessarily what our beliefs are now, but it's more where it started. So the first church we ever went to that we called our home church, because if you ask any Christian, they'll go to churches, but there's the home church. It's their
Right.
mainstay. So what we're going to talk about today is where our journey started, what church our journey started in, and tell some stories and stuff like that. And then we'll go from there. So without further ado, it is all yours, Mr. CCDV.
Oh, the real McCoy. So last week we went through the genealogy from Adam to Noah. We went through Noah's Ark. And then we went through the genealogy from Noah to Abram and the very first story with Abram. So, well, the first couple of stories with Abram, anyway. But I wanted to touch on Noah's Ark here for a moment because there's a lot of confusion. I've watched many a documentary in which they talk about how there are mistakes in the Bible, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, However, in this instance, and for this particular documentary that I watched, they claimed that uh, the mistake in the Bible was from the amounts of pairs of animals that went on the ark. Because they kept saying that, well, we all know that he took two of each kind of animal. And then they said, but then later on it says take seven of each animal. And I'd like to clarify that if that's all right. Um, Here's the thing. In this time, uh, Hebraic law was already being created. All right. Now it's laid down in Leviticus verse by verse. And we will get to that. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's a little boring, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. However, in this case, he was talking about the clean and the unclean animals. So the unclean animals, whatever didn't dwell in the sea, because they wouldn't die from a flood, the land animals and the birds. Now, he did tell Noah to take seven of every kind of bird. He also told Noah to take seven of every kind of clean animal, which chews its cud and has a some kind of hoof. Let's see if I can find that here real quick. Uh, but I don't know. Hold on, I'm losing my place.
Do you want to just start again?
I'm not concentrating really well right now.
It's okay. We can take a break. We can record. I can cut it out. And we can
Okay,
start over.
let me. Yeah,
You can
see if
reset.
I can find that real quick.
Yep. And then just start over when you're ready. You don't have
Yeah,
to rush.
okay.
You
Of
don't have
clean
to rush.
beasts and of clean that are not clean, and fowls of the everything that creepeth upon the earth. 2 and 2 unto Noah and to the ark, the male and the female, and God had commanded Noah. 7 days. Okay, so it's up here. Of every clean beast thou shalt take of thee by sevens, the male and his female, and the beasts that are not clean by two, the male and the female. Let me see if I can find where it describes a clean animal
Uh-huh.
real quick. Da, 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 da. Let me think of all the food they're in. So it is over here on number 6. Okay. Oof. Oh, and I got to talk about the building of the ark too.
Uh-huh. Like I said, I'll just count you in and then you can start over. It'll be all good. And I'll just delete this whole section. Because I can.
Okay, that's not there. Uh, should have done this earlier. Sorry about that. I thought I could find it real quick.
All good. It's a simple edit.
Beast acceptable for sacrifice, 7 of each. 70 in all. Modern ships carry hundreds of live beasts. Oh, come on. There's got to be a descriptor of clean and unclean. Thought for sure I read that. Okay, I need to look up the difference between clean and unclean, don't I? That's what God made the internet for.
That's what I'm doing right now. Leviticus 11, chapter 11 through 4 through 8.
Leviticus, huh?
Leviticus, yeah.
Chapter 11.
Chapter 11, verse 4 through 8. So, clean flying animals would be chicken, dove, duck, goose, grouse, blah, 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 all the way through to turkey.
Oh, okay. So they have to have a divided hoof. That's what it is. If they chew their cud and don't have a divided hoof, etc., etc. Yeah, I'll just read that real quick.
Does that help?
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, where was I? Okay.
that's my cab for dialysis on a Saturday, I'm going to shoot them.
All right, when you're ready.
All right. I'll count you in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so Noah was supposed to take 2 of each unclean animal and 7 of each clean animal.
Pause. Remember, starting over. So do the whole
Oh,
intro.
starting over from the very beginning.
Yeah. So start the whole intro. So in 5, 4.
Oh, I don't have another clip. That's fine.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Rambling Canuck. Now, what we went over last week was the genealogy of Adam through Noah, Noah and the flood, and then from Noah to Abram, and the first few stories of Abram. I'd like to concentrate on the flood because the flood is apparently confusing to some people. I've seen documentaries in which they talk about how there are mistakes in the Bible because in one portion of the Genesis story it says that Noah took 2 of each kind of animal, and then later on it says Noah took 7 of each kind of animal, and so there are obviously and clearly mistakes in the Bible. Okay, well, let me go ahead and show you where you're wrong. Because, yeah, he was told to take 2 of each kind, and they're women, so that would be 4 of each type of animal. Dogs, or actually probably wolves, believe it or not, at that point. Cows, well, no, cows are clean animals, so that would be 7 of each kind. So it'd be 14 cows on the ark. Look at that. Anyway, okay, so 4 lions, 4 camels, that kind of thing. Okay. Now, he was told to take the 2 of each kind of unclean animal, 7 of each type of clean animal, and 7 of each type of flying bird or fowl. All right. Now, it is absolutely explicit in the Bible, and it's not even. I don't know why this is an argument for scholars because it's all in here. Take 2 of each kind of unclean and 7 of each kind of clean. So it still confuses me when they do that. All right. Now I'm in Genesis chapter 6, verses 19 through 22, which you can go back and read. But of every living thing of the flesh, 2 of each sort shall be brought into the ark to keep them alive. Of the fowls of their kind, and every creepeth thing of the earth, 2 of every sort shall be, and take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten. Thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him. So that's where people are tripping up, because in chapter 6, it says 2 of every kind, which is fine because, yeah, at least 2 of every kind, along with their she wives or whatever it was called later on. But then it goes on to explain that Noah is expected to take 7 of each kind of clean animal. And so it's annoying to me that people are using this as an argument for mistakes in the Bible. Let me move over to Leviticus chapter 11 just real quick so I can explain the differences between clean and unclean animals. All right, starting in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 4. Nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, The camel, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the rock badger, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the hare, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you. I did not know Jewish people couldn't eat rabbits. That's a bummer. Of their flesh shall ye not eat, of their carcass shall ye not touch. They are unclean to you. So, I mean, what we're talking about are very specific rules that they are required to follow, even way back before Abram established the house of Israel. Well, it was Jacob who did that. But Abram was the father of all tribes. That's what is often claimed. So that's what we're talking about here, is the clean versus unclean. That's why they can't eat pigs. That's why they can't eat shellfish. Shellfish have different rules, but same concept. So all the fish are fine. All the cows and sheep, they're fine. So there are a lot of rules established which makes an animal clean or unclean. And just because in chapter 6 it mentions 2 of each kind, and in chapter 7 it mentions 7 of each clean kind, does not mean there's a mistake. It just means that those 7 need to be available for sacrifices unto the Lord, which, and then of course they multiply so that they could eat them as well. That's what that means, and I still am very confused why people are using that as an argument why the Bible is wrong, because it clearly states the different rules if you know how to research them. I think I'm out of time, so we'll probably go into the construction of the ark, maybe on a different show. I don't know. I haven't done weekly Bible study in a while, but we can have fun with it. So that's it for me today.
All right, so now it's going to be the first episode of Stories with Canuck. And I'm going to kind of harken back to last week and our topic of our general discussion, which is that Christians deal with adversity. It's not something that we're excluded from. It's not something that we get the day off from. And I thought of a very interesting, I think the proper word would be parable to tell. And I got thinking about something I did as a young adolescent teen that really kind of encapsulates, I think, in my way of thinking, the Christian walk. So when I was about 15, still too young to drive, my Aunt Thelma lived in Stonewall, Manitoba. And Stonewall, Manitoba is 22 kilometers from the perimeter from Winnipeg. So not being able to drive and not really having any friends that had a car that would drive me, I had a bug to go and see my Aunt Thelma. So the only mode of transportation that I had available was a bicycle. So me being young and stupid, I decided that, well, I can ride bike all day. So yeah, this should be easy. It's only 22 kilometers from the city. Yes, I just said that. 22 kilometers, it's only. So that day I got all ready and I got on my bike and I was downtown Winnipeg, Langside and Broadway, for those who know. And I proceeded to go to Stonewall. And for the first 30, 40 minutes to an hour and a half, it was great. It was wonderful. Felt good. Body was good. And I got to the Esso, Highway 7. I had to stop for drinks. I also had to stop because my legs were cramping. So, got off the bike, got my drinks, ready to go. Got back on the bike, rode to Stony Mountain. It's pretty much the halfway point. Got off at Stony Mountain, walked around a bit, had a few cigarettes because I was still smoking at the time, and had a little bit of drink. I think I had Gatorade or something. Anyway, and my body was starting to feel it at that point. But this is the time before cell phones. So I kept pushing on. And that's kind of like your walk in Christianity. You start out and you think it's going to be easy because, it's going to be easy. Then you find out it's not as easy as I thought, but I can still handle this. This is still good. I'm all right. So that's about where we are in the story. Okay, I'm finding out this isn't as easy as I thought it was. And oh boy. All right, well, I can still do this. I got this. So I got back on the bike. And just remember, this is a time before cell phones. So there is no calling for help. There is just no calling for help. So I'm riding and I get to the intersection, the lighted intersection. I am beat. Highway 7, and I can't remember what the other highway is, but it's a left-hand turn. I make that left-hand turn, which means I had to cross 2 lanes of highway. Yeah, that was fun. So get across, do the left-hand turn, and I'm biking, and I'm sore. But I know I'm on the home stretch now. Can't be too much further. And that's all of your montage in your head is. It can't be too much further. I'm almost there. I can do this. And sometimes in your Christian walk, you are in that exact spot. You are, oh boy, all right, enough for a little while. I'm almost at my goal. I'm almost there. I'm almost there. Well, right before Stonewall, there's this evil thing called a hill. And I don't know about you, but when you ride for about 18 kilometers on a bike, the last thing you want to see is a hill. So that was fun. So then you get to that and you're like, ow, ow. And I'm not going to lie, I got off my bike and I walked it up that hill. I didn't ride it up. Not a chance. And sometimes you have to do that as a Christian. Sometimes you have to walk it. And you have to pace yourself a little bit. So after I got off the hill, got going again, finally get into Stonewall. Oh, I was never so happy to see a town in my life. Got there. Right on. I did it. So I get to my aunt's, and I just sit down at the coffee table, and I'm having a coffee with my aunt, and everything is good, and I feel great because I accomplished it. And then my cousin came through the door because she found out I was in town. Unbeknownst to me, I had picked to get to Stonewall by bike the day that my uncle bought my cousin a brand new bike. So my cousin came to the house and was, Robert, come bike ride with me. Well, the last thing I wanted to see at that moment was my bike, but okay. Being a good cousin that I am, got back on my bike and we rode around Stonewall all the way through the quarry, all over town, all day long. I think I was in that quarry for 3 hours, just riding around, same roadways, just over and over and over again. And it's kind of like walking with Jesus, because you think you've got to where you're supposed to be, and then God goes, oh, by the way, there's a left turn over there. Please go take that road. And you're like, but I wanted to rest. And he goes, over there. Oh, fine. So you do that. So after riding around in Stonewall all day, get back to my aunt's, and I'm dead. which I find out that my aunt is traveling, so I can't stay the night. That means impending doom, because I have to ride back home that same night. Another one of God going, sorry, you're not done yet. You still got some more road to cover. So eventually, I got back on that bike after having dinner and saying goodbye to my aunt, and I rode all the way back home. Again, no cell phone, no call for help. And there were times on that roadway where I felt I was done. There was no way I was going to make it. And you know what? I'd be at that brink of just, oh, I can't pedal one more step. I can't go another kilometer. I just can't. I'm too sore. I just can't do it. And then all of a sudden, a semi truck would come rolling by at about 100 kilometers an hour. And I found out real quick that if you stop pedaling when a truck rolls by you at 100 kilometers an hour, it'll push you along for a while, as long as you do it right. I learned that trick real quick. That's kind of, to me, like God was helping me along. Just like in life, God will help you along. Doesn't always mean he's going to pull you out of that situation, but he is going to be there and he is going to help you along. You just may not notice it as something from God. It could be something really small, really tiny. But I made it home. I was sore. Oh, was I sore. And I finally got to rest. And that's kind of, I think, a good parable for life. Because your mission is really not done, ever, until you're called home. So I thought I'd share that with you. And I hope you at least found it informative or laughed a lot at, me being stupid and cycling over 44 kilometers in a day because I was young and stupid. But with that, we're going to go on to our general conversation. So thank you. Stand by.
You know, what I find enjoyable about that story is that when I was 15, I lived in Paramount. Used to ride my bicycle to Long Beach
Okay.
every weekend. Pretty much. I mean, if
Mhm.
I was bored, I'd ride my bike to Long Beach, which is just about 14 miles away.
Yeah.
And so, I laughed when you told me that it kicked your butt at 15 years old to ride your bike 22 kilometers. I was like, eh?
Yeah.
I mean, the one time it really kicked my butt is when my dad went with me.
Oh, okay.
Because we got to Long Beach, and that was no trouble. I've been doing it for a long time. And
Mhm.
then he said, hey, let's turn left.
Yep.
And we went down the coast to Huntington Beach, which is another like 18 kilometers, I think. Call it
Yeah.
10 miles or something. And, we got there and we bought an ice cream cone and, walked down the pier and watched the water crash against the shore and all that. Got back on our bicycles. And he said, hey, I got a great way to get home. Let's take Lakewood Boulevard. And I was like, well, I have to follow you because I've never gone that way before. And sure enough, you know how far it is from Huntington Beach to my house? From Huntington Beach, it was like another 20 kilometers.
Yep.
That is the only time I got exhausted on a bicycle.
Yeah.
I totally understand.
Yeah. All right. So today's general conversation is going to be about where our faith started. So not necessarily we hold all those beliefs still, because you grow as Christians and you move, and things change over time.
Right.
You uh, Sometimes you find, well, this church isn't following the Bible, and you have to move, or life
Absolutely.
happens, or
Or life happens.
you know whatever the case. Each person has their own story, but I thought it would be really interesting today to sit and talk and kind of share stories about the first church we ever really were a member of, not the church that you went to, 2 times with Uncle Bill, and yeah, but your
Yeah.
first church you called home church, because any Christian will have the home church, right?
Yeah.
That's there are many churches they may attend, but they have a home church where they feel at home.
Yeah.
Um, and so I thought we would talk quickly about that experience, our first home church, the one we
Okay.
we. So I'll let you start because I've been rambling for a couple minutes.
All right. Yeah. Get your breath back. I actually have two home churches, believe it or not. Uh, it's odd to say it that way, but it is true. I have two home churches. The reason for that, of course, is because um, my first 5 years in the army, even though I never lost my faith, I felt I wasn't worthy of um, being called a son of God anymore at that time, because my first 5 years in the army was uh, a little debaucherous. um, However, the church that I grew up in, my very first memories of any church ever, was a Foursquare church in Downey. Foursquare identifies as a Pentecostal church. It was established at the turn of the 20th century, so 1900 something or other. And Amy Simple McPherson, which that's a story to tell right there. And she established the church, had Angelus Temple, Life Bible College, et cetera, et cetera. And a bunch of that stuff was long established before I was born. Um, so that's the church I grew up in. And the first pastor I had, uh, he was a youth pastor before he took over the full on pastorship of the church. Um, but his worship team consisted of him sitting on a stool playing a 6-string guitar and singing songs, and they're old choruses or hymnals, right? And I mean, it was an older congregation. I know that there were several kids there. As a matter of fact, one of the families had 3 generations. Uh, that's not unusual in a tight knit church. Uh, so it was kind of neat actually. And then we got a new pastor, right? The one pastor took a position at another church. We got a new pastor, and my mom and dad said, "Hey, let's go help them move in," because it was announced when they were showing up at church, right? And my mom and dad said, "Let's go help them move in." So we all showed up, and we were the only family there. And we were the only family there. We moved them in, helped move them in, and I well, we did stop going for a couple of years, um, and then I think it was my no, it was me. Yeah, that's right, it was me. Okay, I asked my mom if we could go to a service, and yeah, we showed up, and by that time I was yes, I was a bass player at that time, and the new pastor had established a band, a piano player, drummer, guitar player, and a bass player. And I was like, oh, that is so cool. And so I started going back, got my brother and sister to start going back. They both dropped out later on, but it was fine. So that is where I learned the beginnings of my theology, is at that church. Had a great time, obviously, youth group and being in the worship team. I never sang there, except at my grandmother's memorial when she died, but that was a long time after. So, anyway, yeah, we left to move to Arizona in '93 and had a lot of trouble finding a church in Arizona that we enjoyed going to. And of course, by the time I turned 18, joined the army and see the world, kiss the pretty girls, all that stuff. So in 2001, I got married and rejoined the army because I had left in 2000 and signed up in 2001. I think you know the incident that caused me to sign back up into the army. I had spent 5 years in the army. I didn't think I owed the government anything else anymore. But yeah, 2001, I signed back up, and my duty station was Fort Carson, Colorado. And when my when the mother of my children finally showed up with furniture, and I had gotten the apartment and all that stuff all set up, when she finally showed up, we started looking for churches, and the very first church we tried to go to was a Foursquare Church. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a Foursquare Church. They teach from the Bible. They don't teach the way I teach anymore because I've changed a lot. Anyway, so we went to a Calvary Chapel in Colorado Springs, and immediately it was home to us. It was home. I mean, I was, it was, I think, 3 weeks after we were attending, and we had talked to the pastor and his wife several times. And the very first week we showed up, one of the parishioners invited us to her house for lunch. I was like, okay, there you go. Well, this is our home church now. And yeah, sure enough. A few weeks later, I asked the pastor if I could, play bass sometimes. Because there were 3 services a week at that time. I mean, he had a regular bass player. So it wasn't like he needed me.
Uh-huh.
But at that point, I had actually learned how to read chords instead of just note music. And so I was a lot better than I was at the Foursquare Church. I can tell you that. But he said, well, why don't you come to the practice next week? And I was like, okay, cool. So I brought my equipment. He said, just go ahead and play along over there with the other bass player. And I was like, okay, no problem. Because 2 basses, unless they're really good and synchronized and can play against each other, it's not a good thing to have 2 basses at all. However, I stood there and I was reading off the chord sheet, and he said, okay, you can have Wednesday nights. And then a couple months later, he was like, can you play on a Sunday? And I said, yes, sir. And then so the original bass player and I were just switching off back and forth. And eventually I started taking more and more, Sundays and Wednesdays and things like that. It turned out really great. And I mean, I learned a lot because this pastor learned directly from Chuck Smith. And if you're a Calvary Chapel guy, then you know who Chuck Smith was. Um, he actually founded the Calvary Chapel movement, spread it across the world. Um, but it's verse by verse teaching, and so you pick one book out of the Bible, and you teach that one chapter by chapter, verse by verse, and you expand on that knowledge in that chapter, and then you switch, maybe to, or that book. I mean, you finish that book in a series, so sometimes it'll take a couple of months to get through a book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, takes in that way, it takes about 5 years to get through the entire Bible.
Yeah.
And that's the church that I was introduced to. Well, I never actually met the man in person. He died. But I was introduced to his Bible study, Dr. J. Vernon McGee. And you can find his Bible studies on YouTube. They're all free all the time. I mean, if you pay for the 5-year Bible study, then you get a packet of CDs that are about that thick. But it has every single PDF file with every single note in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chuck Smith also has one that is a 5-year Bible study. And of course, the pastor in Colorado Springs went through the Bible every 5 years. It's just basically standard. Takes about 5 years to read verse by verse.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, that's where I started to change from Pentecostal to charismatic. And the difference between Pentecostal and charismatic is that Pentecostal is this is a Bible study for a different time. There's Apollonian, which is very somber, and you read from the hymnal, and maybe there's a piano, but most of the time you're not allowed to even have a piano. And there are degrees of that, of course. And then there's Bacchanalian, and the extreme end of Bacchanalian is dancing around with vipers, and I wasn't in that kind of church, but it was, lay on the, get slain in the spirit, lay on the floor, talk in tongues. Charismatic church is on the Bacchanalian scale, but it's on the very, very conservative side of the Bacchanalian scale. So yeah, that's when I started to change.
Okay. So for me, I only have, for the most part, um, I have one church that I used to up until recently. It maintained as my home church, whether I went to it or not. Now that has changed, and now I go to Believers, and Believers is my home church. Because I like the way that the scriptures are taught. I like the atmosphere. It's very nice, but that's a story for another day. My original church was Augustine United, and I was baptized in that church. My parents were married in that church. I always say that my parents were married and buried in that church because they were. Their wedding was at Augustine United, and their funerals were at Augustine United. However, I'm only going to cover when I attended religiously. Pardon the pun. But I started out in Augustine. I was baptized there as a baby, and then we kind of drifted apart from it. And then I would go in to Augustine. My mom wouldn't go. I did. So I was 6, 7. Yeah, you can't do that now. 6, 7, going to church by myself.
Yeah.
It was just a walk up the street anyway. And during that time, I did everything from choir. I was robe 22. In the soprano section, I could never go there again. And I did the readings. I was the last minute reading guy. So it was kind of funny, a full grown adult would cancel and they'd go to the 9-year-old and hand them the readings and say, please read this. And then the 9-year-old
Yeah.
would get up in front of the church and do the readings with 5 minutes warning. Thanks for that. Or I would help run the Sunday school because 90% of the time it was done by volunteers, and you'd get a different volunteer every once in a while, and they'd have no idea where anything was, and that was my job because I did.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really plan the teachings, but I knew where everything was. So I was Sunday school teacher's best friend because I knew where the keys were hidden. I knew I knew everything. So, that kind of helped. And then life happened at 12. So I was in the choir and I was an active member of the church. I did everything from, like I said, choir to readings to being the usher to whatever I was told I was doing that day. I got voluntold for a lot of things. Um, and but at 12, my mom died. And there's one pastor that I will always have respect for. His name is Don Ross. Don Ross was the pastor of Augustine United, or minister. We don't usually use pastor; we use minister. He was the minister of Augustine United at the time of my mother's passing. Don and I got along for the most part. And what really made me respect Don was Don Ross was scheduled to retire. He never did. He didn't get the memo that he was supposed to retire because he announced his retirement. He successfully achieved his retirement, and then Augustine would just drag him back to the pulpit every once in a while. Every time they needed a pastor, it was Don Ross. As a matter of fact, last time I was at Augustine, which was a few years ago, it was Don Ross. He was filling in for the pastor.
Yeah.
But to the point of the story, Don's last service, his scheduled last service before his retirement, ended up being my mother's funeral. And I said to him at the time before the ceremony happened, I said, "Well, I can go somewhere else. I can wait or something. I don't want my mother's funeral to be your last service." He says, "I don't care what service it is. It's fine." And so I respect him for that because he didn't say, "Well, I'm retiring, so it's got to be somebody else." It was just there was no question.
Yeah.
And it really meant a lot to me. And Augustine still holds a place in my heart. However, I won't really mention too much, but it's just my belief system and the church kind of separated as I'm an adult. And Augustine to me will always, like I said, hold a place. The building itself is like a cathedral. It has the big stained glass and all that fancy stuff. But the thing I miss the most, and I'm gonna bring it up on screen here because I'm gonna tell a funny story. Well, it wasn't funny at the time, but it's funny now in retrospect. So to give you an idea, that's the main chapel for Augustine United. It has a full pipe organ. In case you're wondering, I was on the left-hand side of the organ. Anyway, so and you never filled up the second pews. Those top pews never get used, ever. There is hymn books up there from many, many moons ago that they don't use anymore, and they just sit there and collect dust, which is kind of sad. But the reason I wanted to pull up this picture was to fully illustrate. It's a story that kind of lives in infamy. I bet there's pretty few people in Augustine right now that know the story. But anyway, um, the center pipe, the big long one on the left hand side, one Saturday decided it no longer liked being standing upright and decided to fall. And we always said it was a miracle that that didn't fall during Sunday service the next day. Because if it had, it would have taken out the choir in the front row. Would have taken out the choir and the first six pews. And that's brass. But yeah, that pipe fell. But the organ to me, and I guess it's because I grew up with it, it just there's nothing that sounds like it. Our church has a great band and great singers, but there are days where I long for that pipe organ, because that thing, when especially if you get somebody who knows what they're doing behind the keys,
Yeah.
it can really just wake you up. That organ is just so
And you can
it is
you can
my
actually
preferred. But again, you know that's why we have YouTube and we can listen
right,
to organs.
yeah. Well, you can actually tell someone that actually knows how to play it to pull out all the stops, and they know what
Yes.
you're talking about.
Open that sucker up, please. Please open it up. It's funny because I'll be listening to Amazing Grace on pipe organ,
Yeah.
and if they don't open it up after about the third chorus, I get annoyed. I get very, very annoyed.
Well, on a pipe organ like that, if you pull out all the stops, you're going to blow out everybody's eardrums.
Yes, but you can open it up a little bit. Come on, please. Just a little bit. So yeah, so for me the pipe organ was the musical instrument of the church for most of my young childhood. But that
Yeah.
was my introduction into religion and into Christianity. Um as a matter of fact, when my dad died a few years later, um I hadn't been at Augustine for a while. Um, and when I walked through the door and I explained to the pastor at the time, which was kind of funny. It was a really well. Now I look back and it's kind of a chuckle. Talk about God putting people right in the right place when you need them. So I hadn't been back to Augustine for a while, and apparently, right before this, the pastor that was the minister of Augustine stepped down. So they had an interim minister.
Ah.
Well, the interim minister just happened to be somebody who came in off the streets when I was younger. And her first position in the church was Sunday school teacher. I was her left hand. As she put it, I wouldn't have got through day one without you. So she was temporary minister of Augustine United when my dad died.
Well, that's funny. I like that.
So in a way, it's interesting how that worked out, because if it had been anybody else, they didn't know that I was there, long-term 12-year member and etc. Used to serve in the
Right.
choir.
Yeah.
And it's just, to me, that's always been ironically funny that God put that person in place when I needed them. And my father's ceremony was at Augustine, and we didn't have to pay for a rental or anything like that. Because it was, well, you helped me when I needed you, and I got you. I got this. And so Augustine to me has always been home up until recently. Like I said, I moved to Believers Church. Um, Unfortunately, Augustine it'll always carry in me, but there are just certain things I can't overlook anymore now that the way that I am. So
Yeah.
Um, you know, and for me, it's just it will always hold a special place, like I said, and I'm kind of repeating myself, and forgive me for that, but it really is it really has helped me when I needed it. Augustine United, when my mom died, I didn't have any issues from with I mean, my mother barely attended church, like, ever.
Yeah.
It was me, which is weird. That's a weird dynamic. I would go and my mother didn't. Um, and then, but there was no, well, she's not really a member here, and there was none of that. It was, okay, what do you need? I know that the organist, because my mother loved Amazing Grace, um, the organist took a pay cut and only charged $100 to be at the funeral.
That's pretty
Um,
cool.
the pastor himself, Don Ross, didn't charge a thing, and I didn't have to rent the church. And they even
Right.
had, for my mother's funeral and my father's funeral, they had sandwiches and coffee and tea in the back for family and for afterwards.
Yeah.
And again, it was all because, well, especially when my mom died, I knew everybody in the church. I knew
Yeah. Yeah.
I I know Augustine United inside and out. I even know the door that leads you to the pipe room. Um, uh, it's and the church has changed over the years, and they no longer go all the way up to the top to do the readings. They used to go in behind the choir. They don't anymore. They just go up to the table. That table has been there forever too. Um, but for me, it'll always have memories in that church. But as I say, my home church has moved to Believers. I really like the atmosphere there more than
Yeah.
Augustine now. But that's just me growing and choosing things. So with that, this is a long one, so both of me and Mr. CCTV can be a little bit long-winded. So if you've stuck with us till now, thank you and God bless. And till next time, take her easy, folks.